Good morning, everyone. Well, as I'm trying to get organized here, I have my cup of coffee. Whether you drink coffee or tea, I hope you're able to get up and do your normal morning ritual. We get in habits, and if our habits are interrupted, we find it difficult sometimes. Let me turn this to get more of the lake in there. Besides the water being up, I've also noticed that the water is muddy. I don't know why it's so muddy, but it is. Well, I know why it's muddy, because all the rainwater that washes off the land brings all the mud. And when it does, it washes into here, and eventually it settles to the bottom, becomes the silt that we're familiar with. And it makes it a little difficult to do any fishing. I've got my gear with me this time. I was waiting for the people to move out that were in here that had this big area. And we're going to move in and set up our fishing poles. And when we do, I'll try to show you what we catch. It's, I don't have my hopes up. I know that God has dealt with fishermen before. I know He could help us here. But there's no way I'm going to catch a bonita or something freshwater or saltwater in this freshwater lake. And since this is downstream water from where we camped before, and I wouldn't eat the fish out of there, I don't think I'd eat the fish out of here either. We're not destroying the planet with our things that we're using. They're doing that as an attempt to have control over us. But we do damage. People come in, leave trash all along the river, and eventually it will wash in. They dump chemicals into the river. There's a sewage plant in Atlanta that has a leak, and they are constantly dealing with that. It will cost them way too much money to fix it, so they don't. They pay their annual fine, and the fine does not go up enough. If it went up enough, they wouldn't keep paying it. It's just there. It's $1 million or something a year, but it would be 20 to 50 million to fix the problem. And they just keep kicking the can down the road by only spending $1 million a year. But it still pollutes the land, the water. Anyhow, I did not look up my verses today like I was supposed to, so I'm doing it now while we talk. It doesn't take that much time, but I have to mark them so that way when it's time to get to them, I don't have to worry about taking a lot of time. Since I'm just talking anyway, we're good to go. One last verse to find, and we can jump into this. We know that from our last conversation, we're fighting a war. Well, who are we fighting a war against? We have to remember that. We're fighting a war against the devil, essentially. He's out there. We're going to see what he's doing, why he's doing it to a degree. We know that he rebelled against God. It is surprising that God could actually create something evil. Now, He didn't create evil on purpose. He created him to be the prettiest, powerful, influential creature he'd ever created. We're talking pre-Christ, obviously, at this point. Christ is here in the spiritual side of it, but his manly side didn't come down here until the time that we're familiar with. All right, I got to find this one little book. It's tiny in the New Testament. And the wind keeps blowing my pages. There we go. Now I need to mark it. I keep in my Bible tracts. They are my page marker. So one, they serve a purpose now. And if someone comes up and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" I have a tract to hand out. There we go. Everything is marked. We are ready to go. Now, what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about the devil. We're fighting him, but we're not fighting him. We're fighting ourselves. It's a spiritual war that we're fighting. And there's no way you can win this spiritual war without God. It's a spiritual war. We're human. We don't have a spirit that can go into heaven. Now the devil does. The devil goes back and forth. He's not down here. He's not locked up in a pit. That's coming, but he's not there yet. There's one other verse I could also read to you, but you're familiar with most of these. I'm just going to point out they back up the fact that Satan is down here. Personally, my opinion is he's doing the dirty work that God cannot do. Now, he wasn't given that job, but God uses good and bad people to do his will throughout history. God is loving and can't punish us. He's not sending anybody to hell. That was created for Satan. When he created Satan and he knew what was going on, he created hell as a final place to put him while the earth is here. But eventually he's going to destroy this universe that we know, recreate it cleanly without sin, and Satan's going to get dumped into the fiery pit. He's going to empty hell. That's his final goal. But why he's down here? I think his purpose that God is using is he's making our earthly time down here a dangerous place without God. With God, there's nothing to fear. As long as we're staying in the Spirit. Now you block or you grieve the Spirit, he's not going to be as helpful. But God knows our disobedience and will make provisions up to a point. So let's take a look at, again, I like to use my TV side of this. There's an old show on, an old comic actor, Flip Wilson. And he was on things like he had his own show eventually, but he was on Laugh-In. I don't know if you remember that, but if you haven't, look it up. Corniest, campiest show on jokes, skits, and crazy people. Goldie Hawn was on that show. Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In is what it was called. Goldie Hawn is very senior now, along with her California husband, Kurt Russell. But she first came to fame on that show, and she's done other movies. At first when you saw her on that, you thought that was a fun, cute little thing, but never going to go anywhere. She became a good actress. Anyhow, Flip Wilson had a phrase, and it's not credited to him as the original, of "the devil made me do it." Well, it's not far from the truth. The devil is our alternate choice. We have a choice. God or the devil. Good versus evil. We have that choice. God will not force us to do anything. So we have a choice. You don't want God, you get the devil. It's simple. The old cartoons that would put the devil on one shoulder and God on the other, or an angel on the other. And when Flip Wilson used to have another phrase, "Here comes the judge, here comes the judge." And he'd dress up in black robes and pretend to be a judge. Don't judge anybody. That's how I'll link that in. Okay. Let's turn to Job, chapter 1, verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. Where does God live? God lives in heaven. In the beginning, he came to earth, but he abandoned earth and moved back to heaven. So they're in heaven. You know that Satan goes back and forth all the time to heaven? He lives there. He comes down here to work and goes back up there. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where do you come?" So Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth and from walking back and forth on it." Satan comes down to earth, does his mischief, and then goes back to heaven. Can you imagine an evil being like that having access to God? He does. He sees you doing something wrong, you go up to God and tell him, "Hey, I saw this person do this. Did you know that? That's an evil person. You ought to punish him, or let me punish him." I don't know the conversation. I'm imagining this. The Bible I just read to you tells us that he goes back and forth. He's roaming the earth. We're going to see why he's roaming the earth in a little bit. But he's roaming the earth, and then he goes up to God to report on us. It's a tattletale. And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless, upright man who fears God and shuns evil?" God was proud of the way Job was behaving. And Satan answered the Lord in verse 9, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and around all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased the land. But now stretch out your hand and touch him. Touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." That's Satan's challenge. So God lets him do this a little bit. And when he gets done punishing Job, or allowing Satan to punish Job for doing nothing wrong, he says, "I will never do that again." So Satan's on his own. God will not give him permission to come after us. And especially as Christians, he can't. He cannot take his demons and put them inside of us like he can in some places we've seen in the Bible where they've been cast out. He can't do that with Christians because Christians are protected. Frog behind me, big bullfrog. Okay, so that's basically the story of Satan there. Let's turn to Ephesians 6:12. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. I keep telling you, never get into a fist fight over Christ. That's not what we're about down here. But against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Satan lives in heaven. He conducts his war from up there. And he has everybody do his dirty work. He doesn't have to be at risk. And like we talked last week, therefore take up the whole armor of God. So we can be protected. God has given us the protection and the rule that he would never give Satan permission to come after us. So why do people suffer? Why what's going on goes on down here? The world is a dangerous place. If God allows us to get into a situation that may be harmful, he will give you a way out or a way to deal with it. Sometimes people suffer so that they can show as an example to other people that have the same type of suffering, but perhaps non-Christians. Christians suffer so that we either are tempered to be stronger or an example to teach others. If you want to go talk to somebody about not using drugs, someone who's already kicked the habit and become a Christian would be a good person that this drug person would listen to. They have a commonality. And it can be anything. I just picked drugs. It could be anything. There's a bird flying behind me. So Satan spends his time entirely in heaven? No. That would be easy. But you don't know where he's going to show up. He's not going to bother to deal with the average druggie or bum on the street who's given up. He's already won. He's not going to waste his time on someone like that. I'm talking Satan. I'm not talking God. God's there for everybody, including those people that are in the lowest part of their life. But Satan is out to destroy, and if they're already destroying themselves, he doesn't have to deal with it. Now let's turn to 1 Peter 5:8. This is advice to all of us. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Resist him, steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same sufferings are experienced by your brotherhood that are in the world. See, that's the key. If everybody's going through the same thing, then we know that there's a solution. The solution is to stay close to God. Where will you most likely find Satan here on this earth? Sadly to say, the most likely place you will find Satan working is in the church. I'm not specifically saying your church. I'm saying the church as a whole. We have so many different denominations. That division is Satan's responsibility. And there are fringe churches that aren't even Christians. They walk and talk like they are, but they aren't. And we know that Jesus will say, "Get away from me, I never knew you." And they will be surprised at that time. Now, are we going to survive all this? The Bible tells us we will. And God's always right. Resist the devil and he will flee. Even Satan tempted Jesus, and we got a record of it. I'm not going to turn to it. You've heard it before, but after Jesus fasted 40 days and 40 nights, which you have to be in pretty good physical shape to do that. He's got a human body. It's flesh and blood. It can be killed, as we see eventually. But it can also be resurrected. But But Jesus went to heaven with his heavenly body, because you can't live in heaven without the new body, one which we're going to get eventually. Looking forward to that. This one's about past its, well, I know it's past its warranty date. We'll have our new body. We'll be able to use that new body here on earth and travel like Satan does. Not for the same purpose, of course, but we'll be able to go back and forth. Our job will be to assist Jesus during the 1,000 years. Kings and priests, remember? Okay, and I'm going to talk about what we have to look forward to. Okay, well, we know that Satan is going to be locked up in the pit for the 1,000 years. Part of the reason, I think, this is my opinion, I think this is in here for, it doesn't specifically say, but when we get to the end, people are going to say, well, the devil made me do it. The joke. And so to eliminate that as a possibility, for the millennium, he's going to lock the devil up for 1,000 years so he can't influence people. And when they start the millennium, they're going to have good believers start the millennium, the remnant that's left after the tribulation. And they will do just like man does throughout the Bible, throughout history. They will start off good, and after a generation or two, 1,000 years, that's a number of generations, they're going to deteriorate further and further from God. Towards the end is when we have Armageddon, the world war against God, against Christians, Jewish Christians, but there will be that final battle, and then final judgment and into the pit of fire. That's the end. So let's look to Revelation 20, verse 1. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit, and a giant chain in his hand. I'm assuming this is symbolic, but it could be literal. He laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who was the devil and Satan, just in case you wanted to make sure you had all the names right, because he has many names, and bound him for 1,000 years, and he was cast into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal on him, so that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years were finished. But after these things he must be released for a little while. At the end he'll get released. I saw the thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness of Jesus. There will be plenty of martyrs for the word of God, and who had not worshipped the beast or his image or taken its mark. That's the stuff that's coming that we're not going to be a part of, but it's coming, the mark of the beast, on their foreheads and on their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead did not live again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he who is part of the first resurrection. Okay, and eventually Satan is thrown into the fiery pit for eternity. You see, we all are guaranteed, every human being on the face of the earth that's ever lived or ever will live is guaranteed an eternal life. Everybody, regardless of who you are or how good or bad you are, you have an eternal life. That is undisputed. The only question is, where are you going to spend it? You want to spend it in heaven? You have to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. You can find out how to do it in there. You can find out how to do it by looking at various tracts. Talk to Christians. I typically don't do a salvation message. I've done it in the past, and I've covered my little tract in videos, and I may do it again soon here. It's important that you know where you're going. And Satan has a plan for you. He has a plan for you, and he's good. He's very good. You can't outsmart him. You can't outpower him. On earth, he is king. He is the ruler of this earth. Adam and Eve gave him that power. Now, he's under the guidance of God so that he can't do more than what God will let him do. And he can't do anything to Christians who are staying close to God. And God won't put us through like Job did. He won't put anybody through that ever again. He said so. So temptation doesn't come from God. God does not tempt. If your past is brought up and you're a Christian, it's the devil doing that. God doesn't do that. God doesn't know about your sin. Jesus got rid of it. So don't listen to the devil. He doesn't have your health and well-being in heart. In fact, he wants you dead. Don't hate. Give it to God. Satan wants to do something, you don't want to let him do that in your life. Give it to God. Don't carry the burdens. Don't carry hate. Hate is not good. It deteriorates the body and the mind. If you carry hate, you're carrying a burden that you weren't designed to carry. And you will wear your body, your mind, and soul out. And you will die a younger death than you would if you just gave it to Jesus. Satan doesn't have you in his book of doing good deeds too. God, on the other hand, is pure love, so he will definitely look out for you. But be careful. The most likely place you will encounter him will be friends, family, and church. Places that will have the most influence on you. And he gets trophies. I don't know if he carries a pitchfork like we have in the cartoons, or he has a staff. But I'm sure that he's got many staffs if he has one, because I'm sure he marks every time he destroys the life of a Christian. That's a trophy for him. You know, hunters have trophy rooms. You go in and there's the heads of the animals that they've killed. I'm sure Satan has something like that. Don't be a trophy to Satan. Stay close to God at all times, especially during these times. God is slowly backing away. God does not create bad things here on earth, but he backs away and stops helping the earth. Satan will be able to move in and take in that void. That's why things are going to get tough. We don't know when the rapture is. I still have rapture deniers trying to post on my page. And they cannot just say, I don't believe in the rapture. Prove to me the rapture exists. That would be a good challenge, but they don't do that. They come out and give me 10 pages of why the rapture doesn't exist, and they're quoting things out of context. Satan has already got these schools out there to teach people how to be wrong. And they get involved with these teachers who are wrong. Are they a Christian that's gone wrong, or are they someone who has never been a Christian? My guess is some of the leadership has never been a Christian. But they could be a trophy. They could have been a Christian and gotten so far away from God because they rebelled that God is no use to them anymore. They're still a Christian. This world is a dangerous place. Satan's a roaring lion. Be safe. Stay as close to God as you can. Follow the rules that God has put down. The number one rule, Love God with all your mind, soul, and spirit. Love God. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you do those two things, you will comply with the rest of the law, essentially. Because you don't harm those you love. All right. I don't know when we're going to get out of here. I wish I did. But there are people out there, and I don't know, I'm not saying this to anybody that's watching, but there are people out there, if they knew that tonight at midnight God was coming to get us, they would party until 11:59. They do all the despicable things that we're not supposed to do, and then at the last second, oh God, I'm sorry, take me with you. So that's one reason we don't know. The other reason is that Satan's ready to devour us. Revelation 12. He's going to come down here and try to destroy the church. We will be those that will join Jesus in ruling the earth with an iron hand during the millennium. Jesus will be among them. Satan would love to kill him, but he can't. He'd love to kill us, but we're going to be snatched away. So that's a good reason for not knowing the day as well. People are still guessing. I've got to do a video on the 9th of Av, which is another high watch time. But I keep telling everybody it's not tied to a Jewish holiday. We're in the church age. Until the church age ends, we don't move over to the Jewish timeline. They've still got 7 years left in Daniel's prophetic prophecy of 70 weeks, 70 heptads actually. So they've got a week left, 7 years. But as Christians, we don't have a timeline to follow. That's why Jesus didn't really talk about the rapture. Now, there are going to be people collected up, yes. The 2 witnesses will be raptured, essentially. It's to protect. Once the message is delivered and that part of the time is done, we're going to go to heaven. That's the good news. The bad news for those down here is they're going to be left with the devil for a little while until he's thrown in the pit. Stay close to God. Till we meet in the skies, everyone. God bless. Well, I'm out this morning. I'm going to walk over to my spot to record, but I want you to see this lake that's here is not a standalone lake. It's connected to the river. And I have to assume that the river is up. See how much water has moved in to the grass? There's water coming way in. This is the highest I've seen it since we've been here. And I've been here for a month. That's one of the good news things about this place, is I can stay here longer. And Lord willing, we'll maybe get 2 months out of this, so I don't have to move our gear. It's a beautiful spot. But the water is way up because of all this rain. I think the news said yesterday Atlanta got 2 inches of rain in a couple hours. So they have flooding warnings. And you can hear the birds. They're all around. It's an empty campsite here. Get out and enjoy it. It's going to be gone before too long. We're going to be gone before too long, and you won't be able to do it. Have a blessed day, everyone.